I use this almost all the time. Give me a good seam finish, and it is a Hong Kong, and it's called a Hong Kong. You're going to start off with your plain seam. This one is, I'm going to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance on. This one is a little easier to do when you have a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Press your seam allowance open. Now this one looks like a bias bound edge. Isolate your seam allowance, okay? Single seam allowance. You're going to take your bias tape. This bias tape is again the 12 inches, but you only need 12, but it's only by 1 inch, okay? So that's the cut for this one. It's in your syllabus in case you get confused. And I'm going to apply the bias edge to the right side of my seam allowance. I isolated my seam allowance. I'm applying the bias edge to the right side of my seam allowance at 1/4 inch. Again, I apologize sometimes if I forget my back stitch, which I've already done before with this sample, not the back stitch. Okay, now for the Hong Kong, I'm going to press it to one side, which is the right side, and then, ooh, this whole thing just came out. What the? Well, that's bizarre. Allowance. Press your bias towards your seam allowance, towards the stitch. And then you're going to press it again till it goes to the back side, okay? And you're going to keep it as a raw edge in the back, okay? Got some loopies there, I don't know what happened. Okay, you're going to press it, and then you're going to press it again so it goes to the back side, like that, okay? It looks like a bias bound edge. Not fun, not fun. What you're going to do now is you're going to stitch this. This is the raw edge on the back side. Once this way, once around, so there's a raw edge on the back side. What you're going to do is you're going to stitch right where I've put my needle. It's called a crack stitch, or stitch in the ditch, okay? And if you do this correctly, and if you do this with a piece of thread that matches what you're doing, the stitch basically disappears. So in order to get this pretty accurate, you want to stitch right in the space between your bias tape and your seam. There's a little ditch there. And when you're starting here, I'm not expecting this sample to be 100% accurate. I'd like to see 3 or 4 inches that are fairly accurate, and you've got 2 sides to do this too, so you don't have to. Stitch is getting stuck. So you want to get this fairly accurate. You want to stitch right in that space between your bias and your seam. Take your time with this one. If I was all warmed up for sewing accurately, especially if I've been sewing for a couple of hours, usually this just kind of comes out. So what you're looking for is this section here. You see how you can barely see that stitch? Mm-hmm. Okay, I did catch the back side of that. So, but you can see how you can barely, that's a good stitch in the ditch right there. Now you can see it's off by like a thread. And then up here, I actually caught the bias. You won't want to do that. You want to get it so it's like in this section here. So you can barely see that stitch. That's accurate. Now we do a lot, we do